We've all been there, haven't we? You take a personality assessment, have a quick read of the report, and think, wait, this feels off. Is this really me? It's like trying on a jacket that doesn't quite fit. Maybe the shoulders are too tight, or the sleeves aren't right. But here's the thing, when someone questions their disc flow results, it's not a problem to solve, it's a doorway to deeper understanding. Let's talk about how to walk through that door together. So imagine this. Someone sits down with their report, frowns and says, this isn't me. Our first instinct might be to explain or defend the tool. But the most powerful thing we can do is simply acknowledge their perspective. A simple, thank you for sharing that, let's explore this together works wonders. Why? Because when someone feels heard, walls come down. It shifts the conversation from, let me convince you, to let's discover something new. Now, let's demystify the tool itself. The disc flow profile isn't a judge or a label, it's a mirror. It reflects the answers the participant gave at a specific moment. Maybe they were stressed that day. Perhaps they pictured themselves in a work crisis rather than a team meeting. Context shapes how we respond. So we might say, let's look at what might have influenced your answers. Were you thinking about a particular situation? A role that demands a different side of you? This frames the report as a snapshot, not a life sentence. But here's where the magic happens. Instead of debating whether the report is right, we get curious. Think of this profile as a compass. It doesn't define your path, but it highlights directions you might explore. So we ask, let's see where this compass is pointing. Does it point to a situation you find challenging? Or does it reveal a strength you haven't fully recognized yet? For example, if someone disagrees with being labeled highly analytical, we might say, could this be pointing to how you solve problems at work, even if you don't see yourself that way? Or might it reflect how others rely on your attention to detail? Suddenly, the conversation isn't about right or wrong, it's about clarity. Where does their self-view align with the compass? Where does it differ? Those gaps? That's where growth begins. To make this tangible, I love a simple exercise. Grab a pen and mark the report. First check what resonates, cross out what doesn't, and put a question mark on the maybes. This hands-on approach does two things. It gives the person ownership of the process, and it surfaces patterns. Why did you highlight this section? What makes that feel untrue? Often, the act of physically engaging with the report uncovers insights they'd miss if we just talked about it. Of course, humans aren't robots. We adapt. Think about it. You might be collaborative in meetings, but decisive in a crisis, or outgoing with your team, but more reserved at home. The disc flow model measures tendencies, not absolutes. So we might say, could parts of this profile reflect a specific context? Where else in your life might these tendencies show up differently? This reminds them and us that behavior is fluid, not fixed. Now, if someone pushes back, disc flow feels too boxy. We don't argue. Instead, we acknowledge, you're right. No tool can capture the full complexity of a person. But here's how I've seen it help. It gives us language to talk about strengths, blind spots, and how we show up in relationships. Let's focus on what's useful for you, even if it's just one takeaway. This approach shifts the goal from agreement to application. Sometimes, the disconnect isn't about the report, it's about how we see ourselves. I once worked with a leader who hated being called influential. I'm not a salesperson, she said. But her team shared, you don't sell, you inspire. When you speak, people lean in. That gap between self-perception and others' views, that's gold. So we might ask, if you shared this report with someone who knows you well, what would they say? Where might they agree or surprise you? Even if the report misses the mark, the conversation doesn't have to. We pivot. Let's focus on what you want to work on. Communication, confidence, conflict resolution. This session is yours. Maybe their goal isn't even disc-related. Maybe it's about preparing for a tough conversation or leading a new team. By centering their priorities, we keep the session valuable, no matter how they feel about the tool. And if they're still not buying it, that's okay. Growth isn't a race. We might say, let's set this aside for now. Revisit it in a week or a month. Sometimes insights click when we're not forcing it. And you know what? I've had people email me months later. I reread my report and suddenly it made sense. Trust the process and their timeline. At the end of the day, this isn't about the disc flow profile being right. It's about starting a conversation about how we see ourselves, how others see us, and how we can grow. Because when someone says, "This isn't me," they're not rejecting the tool. They're inviting us to dig deeper. And that's where the real work begins.